This video I talk about chemical bonding, that how chemical bond hold atoms together in different types of compounds. In this video I talk about some of the basic concepts which are necessary to understand while understanding the concepts of bonding in different types of compounds. We are going to discuss some of the following subtopics, and the topics are the electronic shells and the filling of the electronic shells, the octet rule, and why atoms form chemical bond, and what makes chemical bond logical. This is some chemical combination in which sodium metal reacts with chlorine gas and it forms sodium chloride. Would you expect what type of chemical bonding take place between sodium and chlorine to form sodium chloride? Here on quick review of some of the basic concepts which are fundamental, and you must have to understand these concepts while understanding the concepts of bonding. Remember some of the key concepts you learned in your previous lectures regarding atomic structure. For this lecture you should know the meanings of the following words. These are atom, element, atomic number, electron, and the electron cloud. My dear students, do you have an idea about the electronic shells? I think you have learned something like electronic shells, that is in different theories about the atom. That is in Rutherford atomic model, you have identified the nucleus residing at the central part of the atom, and in Bohr's atomic model you learned about the movement of the electrons in different energy levels. These energy levels are the electronic shells. So atom has a certain number of electrons which orbit around the nucleus in electronic cloud. These electrons orbit in different energy levels. These levels are designated as K, L, M, etc. Now we understand the filling of shells. Shell 1, which is the K shell, and it is nearest to the nucleus. The first shell can house 2 electrons and it must be full before any electron can move to the next shell. And the shell 2, which is farther away from the nucleus, this shell is also called L shell, the second shell, which can house 8 electrons. Now we understand the filling of shells. Shell 1, which is the K shell, and it is nearest to the nucleus. The first shell can house 2 electrons and it must be full before any electron can move to the next shell. And the shell 2, which is farther away from the nucleus, this shell is also called L shell, the second shell, which can house 8 electrons. The figure is the neon atom. There are total 10 electrons which are to be filled in its shell. As you know that the first shell can only reside 2 electrons, therefore 2 electrons reside in the first shell, and the remaining 8 electrons go into the second shell. First shell is the K shell and the second shell is the L shell. So we are over an important rule, that is the octet rule. All atoms tend to fill their electronic shells completely. Since most shells can hold 8 electrons, this phenomenon is known as octet rule. So octet rule means that 8 electrons in the outermost shell. Check for understanding about the octet rule. Fluorine has 9 electrons as a whole and 7 in its outermost shell. It will need 1 more electron to fill its octet because there are 7 electrons in the outermost shell of the fluorine. So 1 electron is needed to complete its octet. Here in the red box you have some questions. How many electrons would carbon need to fill its octet, and what's about neon? So the answer to these questions is that number of electrons that carbon need to fill its octet is 4, because in outermost shell carbon has 4 electrons and 4 electrons are needed to fill its outermost shell, so to complete its outermost shell. And the neon have 10 electrons, so 2 electrons are present in the first shell and 8 electrons are present in the second shell. So neon has already filled its octet. Now, after all, we are at a position to describe what is chemical bond. When atoms combine with other atoms, then a force operates between atoms which hold them together. This is known as chemical bond, and this phenomenon is called the chemical bonding. We are an important question. Why atoms form chemical bond? Atoms form chemical bond due to the following reasons. Number one, to fill their electrons completely in their shells. As you have learned about the octet rule, that every atom have a tendency to complete their octet, and it may be done by losing or sharing of electrons or gaining electrons. So different types of bonding may be arise. And number two is to gain stability, and because free atoms are not stable because they have odd electrons in their shells, so they have to complete their octet, so they have to gain stability to stabilize their services. We are finally at what makes chemical bonding logical. Here are some